Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FITPRO doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FITPRO? This is the FITPRO Session Podcast with Parallel Coaching.
Welcome to episode number 7.
All about cognitive behavioural therapy.
How are we doing?
And how this relates to you as FITPROs.
Completely more to the point. That's the key, isn't it? 'Cause it's all about behaviour change for you as a FITPRO to elicit behaviour change, maybe in yourself,
Yes.
first and foremost, but also for your clients.
Yeah, and how do you offer advice? It doesn't mean that by doing this podcast today that you're going to become this cognitive behavioural therapist that you can
Far
go
from it, in fact.
exactly.
Far from
It's
it.
about how do you understand the mechanisms of what this type of therapy is, so you can refer a
What
client.
I hope season 8 does for the FITPRO industry, really, doesn't matter what you're disciplined in, whether you're Pilates, yoga, personal trainer, boot camper, spinner, it really doesn't matter. What I hope it does is it inspires you to say, well, I need to find more information about this particular approach or this therapeutic avenue, and that really, I don't know, like lights a flame up for me, and I want to go and explore this. I'm going to go and find maybe a qualification or a short course or a one-day CPD or something online, or I'm just going to read around this subject, because at the end of the day, you need to be adequately trained in this, because you're dealing with someone's beliefs, you're dealing with someone's values, you're dealing with someone's behaviour.
Unconscious thoughts.
Unconscious thoughts. You know, this isn't something to dabble in.
It's a bit like a big taster platter, isn't it? Not to bring
Completely.
it back to food every time.
Every time.
But,
This is
but
like
this,
the buffet
season,
of the Chinese
and you
buffet
can go,
of...
Ooh, I like a bit more of that. I'll go back and learn a
Completely.
bit more about that thing.
Yeah,
which I like
and that's,
that.
I suppose that's how I got into it from you know, back in kind of 2010 really, was dabbling into lots of different therapeutic approaches, and then saying, actually, I really enjoyed motivational interviewing, and that's when I went and did a number of short courses on motivational interviewing. And then that leads down this kind of rabbit hole of, actually, in order to understand this, I must understand NLP, and then that leads into, well, I must understand cognitive behavioural therapy,
and then hypnosis, and it kind of
and you keep going. I don't know, maybe it's just me.
But that's what's nice about expanding your knowledge across lots of areas. Allows you to pick one area that you find more interesting, and you can almost like follow your nose as such. So you just kind of keep going in line with that thing you find interesting, so that you can keep diving deeper.
On this platter of conversation, then, what have we covered so far in season 8?
So season 8 has had our FITPRO guide to behaviour change. So we introduced what behaviour change actually is.
I really liked that, because we talked about the kind of the 4 processes of cue, craving, response, reward.
Yes.
And understanding that was kind of a feedback loop. The reward actually allowed you to get a greater cue, and the cue actually fed the reward.
Yes, it wasn't just linear. They cycled around each other.
Yeah, and that gave huge context to everything
Why
we've
we
done.
change.
Yeah, and the context to season 8 as well. So then we went into
understanding the trans-theoretical model,
which I think is kind of the backbone of behaviour change, and understanding that there's various stages of change and a process of change, and that it's not a standing scale.
Yeah, we said it's not black or white, that you've changed or you haven't changed, you're ready to change or you're not ready. It was that kind of like graded approach of that kind of grey areas in between. And then we had exploring self-efficacy, which I think was really, really powerful, because we had lots of really tangible examples of how you could improve a client's self-efficacy through exercise, through nutrition, through mindset, and how you're literally building them up as part of your journey.
I like that one. I like that one a lot, because it also built on one of the constructs of the trans-theoretical model. Cool.
Yeah, and then we developed communication skills.
That was wicked. I enjoyed that one.
Lots about listening and sort of how you
paraphrasing and summarising, and I hope that gave that's something you can action immediately. You don't need to go and do another course in it. I don't see it. I think it's a key part of the level 3 PT, yoga and Pilates anyway.
key part of anything, isn't it? Communication skills.
Yes, completely.
Yeah. And then we went on to what motivates a person to change.
I think this was my favourite one so far.
The motivators.
The motivators, and it was about, the towards pleasure or away from pain.
Yeah, and we also had the idea of whether it's in the health, wealth, or relationships as well.
Yes, completely.
So
I knew there was something else.
The specific type of motivation that person has. And then we linked that into marketing as well,
yes,
which was really
I
interesting.
liked about that is because it's basically saying if I go deeper in my questioning, and we had meta language, didn't we?
Yes.
Which was going into the kind of the details of a particular thing, so the features. Then we went into the airy fairy woolly stuff as we went into Milton and went up, and we understood that actually if we keep describing the goal, we will find out that there is a common goal or a common word that links to either health, wealth, or relationships.
Yeah, so you kind of go deeper but wider.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
the final one was
week,
SMART goals.
And I think the feedback from that has been fantastic because SMART goals are seen as something that, here they go again.
There's the surprise, isn't it?
SMART goals. But actually what we dropped last week was this understanding that it wasn't just about specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. We had another SMART acronym and a third SMART acronym. And then you've got these kind of 15 denominations, which I suppose I haven't worked out. You could have hundreds of different denominations.
Yeah, there's probably thousands,
to truly understand actually what's going on inside someone's goal.
Yeah.
That links really nicely to this week. And I think that overview of this platter we've just talked about links nicely to this week as we talk about cognitive behavioural therapy.
Or CBT.
Which is, I suppose, probably the number one therapeutic approach used inside managing many common clinical conditions within inside the NHS. It sits under a nice guideline as the kind of the key therapeutic approach for a number of conditions and a number of clients.
Yeah, well, it's a recognised approach for being able to change behaviours and change cognitive thought processes, which I think is really different to maybe we were talking a lot about behavioural change. But what I like is this step before it that happens in terms of in order to change someone's behaviours, you must first think about or be aware of the thoughts that have influenced those behaviours.
Yes.
So instead you go, well, we'll go for a model in a moment, but this situation happened, therefore I reacted or responded with this thought, and then that thought led on to a behaviour. Now, you can't change the behaviour unless you change the thought.
Wicked,
and that's
really
where CBT sits.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
It changes the thought.
So if we go back to like CBT, we're talking about going back to like the 1960s with Aaron Beck and some of the kind of key founders of this therapeutic approach. And since then, it's had literally hundreds of scientific papers that have explored this, pulled it apart, and it's an incredibly credible, incredibly credible. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like therapy.
Therapy, yeah, completely.
And that's why it's so backed up and used a lot in healthcare as well, because it's got so much of a proven research background to it. It's not experimental in any way.
Yes.
And as a result, it's also very specific to the individual and their current thoughts, whereas some other therapies
This is a great point.
They look at past events, they look at like future events, they look at blueprints of families, genetics.
Yes.
And this is actually saying, this is what you're thinking. We could change that. You don't change you as a person, but it means that your behaviours start to change.
Perfect. So CBT is about the now, not necessarily what
pinning
you
it on what you did as a kid, or
yeah, perfect.
Doesn't go necessarily Freudian in terms of childhood and bringing up. It's just about where you are now, which makes it really accessible, I think, without it being intrusive.
What I liked about something you just said is it's about a thought process, or what I'm thinking about right now. So right now I'm recording this and I'm thinking about looking at my notes, which are in front of me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm present in this moment here. But I can't see, touch or feel or taste or smell my thoughts. I can't do any my thoughts. I can't take my thoughts out and say, Hayley, there's all of my thoughts. Okay, but I've got a thought in my brain right now, and I could write that thought down. Okay, that doesn't mean I'm showing you my thoughts. I'm showing you a response or a reaction or an action through behaviour to articulate my thoughts.
Oh, wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I kind of imagine thoughts as like this great big empty skull with like these little word art images kind of like bouncing off the walls.
Almost like a screensaver in
the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s.
On the big white computers.
I
used to bounce off the walls.
In the computer room, you just used to watch, like, ding, ding, almost like a cat looking out the window.
Yeah.
We digress.
That's what I imagine with the thoughts. But like you say, you can't grab them or know what they are. They come out in the behaviours, they come out in the feelings.
And so this is what I like about CBT and this season so far, is we're really recognising that it comes down to language. Okay?
Yeah.
And understanding, we use the term thoughts or as if we are our thoughts, as if those thoughts are real.
Yeah.
Now, it comes down to, I suppose, a perception, isn't it? Something that my coach has helped me come to terms with, or has given me a model of, is imagine you're sitting on a sofa right now. In fact, wherever you're sitting right now. Okay, I'm sitting on a sofa next to Hayley. We've got a green screen behind us, okay? And straight ahead of us, if I looked at us, face on, that would be one perspective of my thoughts.
Yes.
Or one perspective of language. Now, if I step to the side of the couch or your chair and you step to the side, okay, you're now looking at it from a different perspective.
It looks totally different.
It looks totally different.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm now looking at the side of my body. I'm looking at it from a different plane. I'm looking at it from a different axis of movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry to bring the anatomy in. So now I'm looking at it from a different perspective, but it's still the same thought.
Okay,
it's still, everything about it is the same.
Yeah.
However, I'm looking at it from a different perspective.
Nice.
Okay, and that's what I like about.
And if you went around the other side, it'd be different again, and the back would be different
from the back
again.
of my head, not the front of my head, but I'm still
On
looking at
bird's eye, it'd be different.
Precisely. And so
It reminds me of a dice, and just to digress, but it reminds me of a dice. You look at it one way and it's got one dot on it, but on the other side it's got 6 dots. It's the same dice.
Completely. And you could have one person viewing that and going, well, I don't know what the problem is. You're just looking at a dice. You go, no, I'm looking at 1 dot. And the other person goes, no, I'm looking at 6 dots.
But we're looking at the same thing.
But we're looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at language, we need to kind of walk around the chair, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, and view it from different perspectives and pull it apart and say, well, what does it mean from this angle?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what I really like about CBT, is that it teaches you all the different types of thoughts that you have or that exist, so that you can understand what they are like from all angles.
Completely. On top of that, just going back to it, it's about the language of understanding that my thoughts I am not my thoughts, and my thoughts are not me.
Yeah.
Okay. And that those thoughts aren't actually real.
Yes.
Because I can't pick those thoughts up. You've gone out of screen. Hayley dropped her notes. Okay. You can't pick those thoughts up. You can only articulate them in the ways that you're capable of articulating them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes sense. So you just know it in your way.
So, like, for example, our 4-year-old niece could articulate her thoughts using Crayola crayons, and it would be, I don't know, like a messy picture on
Yeah. She has to do a picture and it's just a scribble. Yeah,
but she'd be able to articulate her thoughts about that day, whereas an artist would be able to articulate them in a very different way. So it's whatever our capabilities are at that moment is our capabilities to articulate our thoughts.
So you're saying in terms of language is key here, becomes taking that screensaver thought that we had bounced around in our head and then being able to project that outwards in a language that works to communicate or articulate
it. Not just CBT, but any therapeutic approach, for the practitioner, therapist, whatever title you want to give them, is to be able to ask the right world-class questions, to be able to, for them to be capable to articulate what it is they're thinking.
Yes.
Okay.
Nice.
And then be able to walk around the chair for them and for you to understand, well, what does it mean from this perspective? What does it mean by this perspective? Which is why 2 episodes ago we talked about communication skills, because it could be that they have this thought and are unable to articulate the thought, and it's only through paraphrasing and summarising and those communicative open questions, that you and the client, or client and therapist, are able to go, actually, that's exactly what I mean. Perfect. Yes.
Yeah, and you can see how this relates to goals massively as well, can't you, with thoughts? Because we done goals last week, so you can kind of tell that when you ask a client, well, what is your goal? it's their world, it's their perspective of that chair. So they're looking at their goal. Let's say they're looking from the right hand side of the chair and they're looking at their goal and they're trying to articulate and explain that goal to you as if like, here's the chair, this is what I want to achieve, this is like I can imagine it like this. But their articulation of it might not be what you're seeing when they're articulating it. So based on them explaining it, you then look at it from a different side and might perceive it differently. It's only the open questions that allow you to get specific enough.
I'm going to be a bit abstract here. It's kind of like, imagine if we went to an architect now and said, I want to build my dream house.
It's that.
Okay, and he said, right, cool, so what do you want your house to look like? So, well, obviously I want it to have 4 walls, I want it to have this door in the middle, and I want a window either side, and I want this big circular window over the stairs. And they go, cool, what about the side of the house? And you start, does that make sense? So
yes, you
the
just
architect, and that's what I see the therapist here, or you as the FITPRO here, is the architect to building their goal.
So what does it look like round the side?
Completely.
What's the roof like?
Exactly. If you were to stand in this position and you looked up, what do you see?
What feelings do you get when you enter the house?
Perfect. And does that make sense?
Yes.
So when you look at this is, I suppose, what our role is as a FITPRO, and it's about, I still want to stress, it's about staying in lane here and understanding that if somebody has got an issue that you think requires more guidance, then that's where you would refer out to a CBT specialist, or first and foremost you'd refer out to the GP, and the GP would then refer out into this multidisciplinary approach. So the GP becomes the centre, the hub, which is what exercise referral and long-lasting conditions for new course is all about.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's still, this information is still really useful, and I mean you can use it because it allows you to challenge someone's thoughts, feelings and emotions and actions around their nutrition, around their physical activity. And as we start to break down this model over the next kind of like half an hour, 45 minutes, my aim is for you to have actionable, tangible, useful tools to go, I can do that with a client right now.
Yes.
I can go and ask this question and I can explore this problem with my client right now.
Or even just recognise things. So part of what we're going to talk about in CBT as we go through it is about thought processes and knowing, like being able to recognise a helpful and unhelpful thought. So if you can recognise that your client's got a string of unhelpful thoughts, you might go, actually, I will refer you on to someone, because there's a way that you can address these thoughts, make them much more helpful, and that will then change your behaviours. So it can work really nicely. But I think before we go there, it'd be great to do the model.
Let's outline this model then. So imagine at the top of, have a blank bit of paper, okay? So if you've got a blank bit of paper, you can write this down, but you can imagine it, okay? So let's be the architect to this.
We're going to try and draw it out.
Go and try and draw it. So at the top of a bit of paper, okay, in the middle of a paper, just draw a small circle, and inside that circle, just write situation, okay? And this is like, what is the trigger, okay? What
the
triggers...
cue, the thing that happens.
Yeah, what is the cue? What is the trigger that sets this kind of cascade of thoughts, emotions, behaviours and reactions off?
Physical reactions,
okay.
Yeah. So you've got situation at the top, and then that goes down into thought, and then imagine you've kind of got these 4 like different sections or 4 boxes. Now they're all interconnected, so it doesn't really matter what order you do with, but it goes from thoughts, then you've got emotions, you've got behaviour, and then you've got physical reactions, and they can kind of go round cyclically, and they can go in between each other as well. So they're not just that you have to go thoughts to emotions, but you might go thoughts straight to behaviours.
So let's so you're probably lost on your bit of paper right now. So in the top of a bit of paper, we had a circle which said situations, okay, and next to that you might have like what triggers the problem, okay, and then underneath that, I suppose an easy way of describing it is imagine a compass with north, east, south and west.
There you
okay?
go.
So in north, okay, so just underneath situations, you're going to have north, east, south and west. So at north, you're going to write thoughts. At east, you're going to write emotions, which is quite nice because it begins with an E.
Yeah.
Then at south, you're going to write behaviours. And then at west, you're going to write physical reactions. Now, you can see that there could be a cyclical. So those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can see my finger moving. It's like a cyclical from situations down to thoughts, and then thoughts, round to emotions, round to behaviour, round to physical reactions, back to thoughts. But then you could have a cross in
like the compass.
Like the compass, okay? So you could actually go from thoughts directly down to behaviour, or emotions directly across to physical reactions.
Nice.
And so what we've got here...
It's interconnected, isn't it? More like a maze.
Yeah. Well, it's an interconnected
web,
really, because it basically highlights that it isn't as simple as you go from this step to this step to this step to this step, similar to like the transtheoretical model. Okay, you've got your situation or the trigger, the cue, okay, and that's going to set off this cascade of thoughts. Now, the thoughts you have, okay, are going to stay between your left ear and right ear, but that is going to set off a whole host of emotions, okay, which links to a whole physiological response, okay, which would be your physical reactions.
Yeah, so like feeling tired, loss of appetite, all those types of things.
Yeah, so another way, my initial thought would be that my emotion would be that I'm, I don't know, let's say angry, and therefore my physical reaction would be a heightened level of adrenaline. Does that make sense?
Yes, physiological change.
Physiological change. That would be a physiological reaction based on an emotion, based on a thought that perhaps was or wasn't real.
And then you create a behaviour, aka letting the anger out, throwing a cup against the wall, whatever it might be.
Completely.
Yeah.
And so you can...
Or like a little kid stamps a foot.
Completely. And so it's not as simple as going thoughts, emotions, behaviour, reactions. You've got this cross in the middle that allows the emotion to jump somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay.
That from thoughts, all three are impacted in different ways at different times.
Yes.
Sometimes it will be one way round, other times it will be a different way round.
And there's no right or wrong, there's just okay. Nice. And every individual and every situation and every trigger for every client will have its own path.
Yeah, nice. That's really smart. Yeah, I just want to go through a nice example, like real simple, like as simple as we could possibly make it. Let's say you are criticised by another PT in club. Okay. Let's make it that simple.
Okay, so the situation is
that PT. Let's just say Bob goes up to Jim and says to Jim, look, you're doing that wrong.
You're doing the lap pull down wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
And then we're going to go on Jim's path. So Bob criticised Jim, and now Jim's thought process at that point, he might go, I'm not good enough, or I'm really bad at this, or he might think, I don't like Bob.
Yeah.
All these different thoughts. Think how many different thoughts.
It's a gazillion level of thoughts. It could be a thoughts all about how Bob shouldn't have said that. Bob was like this. Bob isn't very good. Bob doesn't have any clients. And then it could be, well, I don't have any clients. Enough. Maybe that's why I'm not good enough. I didn't learn this on
I shouldn't do this. I'm a rubbish PT. All of that starts coming out. And that will influence, in no particular order, emotions. So he might be feeling like worthless, anxious.
Low self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Sad, annoyed, angry at Bob.
Yeah.
So he could be angry at Bob, but really like low in his own mood of like, well, maybe it is my fault. Deflated. Yeah. It would influence his behaviour, so he might avoid contact with Bob next time and just be like, I'm not even gonna do lap pull down around Bob. He might criticize me. He might even turn around and say, I'm never going to do lap pull down again because Bob's been doing this. So one of the thoughts, Bob's been doing this for way longer than me. Bob knows more than me. Okay, Bob's more qualified than me. He's got his level 4. I'm only just on my level 3 and I'm newly qualified. So my behaviour is I'm not going to have clients around Bob and I'm not going to use the lap pull down in case Bob does see me.
Yeah.
Or other clients, or I think the same, I'm not good enough.
Yes. Yeah, and then his feelings or his physical reactions to that might be things like feeling like tired and lethargic about it, or he might be like, I'm not going to carry on my workout now, I've done it wrong, I'm going to go home. That kind of like sluggish, like apathetic.
Well, it could be that every time Jim walks back into the gym.
Okay. That was done well.
Every time he sees the lat pull down, he gets sweaty palms.
Yeah.
Every time he sees the lat pull down, he has an irregular heartbeat of like that, like it feels that nervous. It feels like his heart's like pounding.
Yeah.
It could even feel like his breathing rate changes or his pupils dilate.
Now what?
Or he looks. Sorry to jump on. Like he could even look nervous.
Yeah.
He could look
around.
He could be looking around. He could look, apprehensive.
On edge.
And now in the gym, in the foyer or around that area, you've got clients looking at Jim going, well, he doesn't look particularly confident. He looks nervous. He looks apprehensive. He doesn't look like he's confident. He hasn't got his shoulders back like he usually does. And so now that links to other people's thoughts, emotions, behaviours and physical reactions to Jim.
And his own thoughts, emotions and behaviours start to cycle. And then let's just say you're having a chat with Jim months down the line And you're like, it's really interesting. You never do the lat pull down with your clients. Why don't you do the lat pull down with your clients? And he's like, I don't know. I just never really do it. So he gets to the point whereby his behaviour sets in stone and becomes a habit that he's now avoiding, say, the lat pull down, or he avoids Bob, whatever his behaviour was based on the thought.
Well, it's something we said in, I think, the first episode for season 8 was by James Clear and looking at atomic habits, and that's where the cue, craving, response to reward came in. And understanding that the first time you do something, that's for learning or the failure, and every time after that is a habit.
Yes.
Okay, so you only really ever fail or learn once. So what's happened here is the first situation was the most potent situation where Bob actually had that interaction. They only interacted once, remember?
Yeah.
And that was enough to set this thought cascade, emotion cascade, behaviour cascade, physical reaction cascade off, whereby there didn't need to be any more dose.
Yeah.
The potency of that first dose was so great that it meant that it became a habit after that. Now, this could be at a conscious level where Jim could say, but I don't like Bob, and I'm no good at this, and my self-doubt, yada, yada, I'm a cascade. Or it could be at an unconscious level. So Jim could be completely unaware that situation and interaction and potency with Bob
is the reason he doesn't do the lat pull down anymore.
Is the reason he doesn't do the lat pull down.
He just has a horrible, icky feeling about the lat pull down, doesn't do it. And every time I go near it, I never like it.
Completely.
Just don't like it.
And so it would be
totally unconscious.
So within CBT, the role of CBT would be to unpick that and find out, well, you don't necessarily have to start with a situation. You could start any one of the 5 key areas. So you've got situation, you've got thoughts, you've got emotions, behaviour, and physical reaction. And you can work in it and trying to unpick any one of those to get back and I suppose reverse engineer of what's going on.
And this is what I find really interesting about CBT is it's not just about going back to that same situation and unpicking the past, but it then deals with how do you stop something like this happening again, whereby you intercept it at the thoughts. So it's almost like a training tool whereby you're teaching somebody to manage and be aware of their thoughts much better. So the next time Bob interacts and says something bad to Jim can actually deal with it and process his thoughts in a helpful way rather than in an unhelpful way. So it doesn't have to unpick the past necessarily to get movement forward.
Perfect. That summarises CBT a treat. So I'm going to high five you for that. I like that because it is about the thoughts, feelings and emotions in the now.
Yes.
What I also like is that kind of Mercedes model, that links, I suppose, closely
so close to this, isn't it?
CBT. So imagine get a new bit of paper now, okay? And imagine the Mercedes car, the Mercedes badge. Imagine that logo, and it's kind of a dot in the middle, and it's got like 3 arms off it, isn't it? So you've got 3 clear areas. So thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
A pie divided into 3.
Haley's gone back to food.
Or cake, never mind.
Chocolate cake divided into 1, Haley, please.
It's all mine.
It'd be a full Cadbury's Dairy Milk. Divided into 1 portion, please, just for Haley.
But anyway, you're so starved.
I know, completely. Okay, now you've set me off on this thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I love it. But you've got Mercedes model. So you've got thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So your thoughts directly impact your emotions, and your emotions directly impact your feelings, and it's a cyclical cycle as they go around.
Thoughts, feelings, and emotions and behaviours. And the 3 of them keep going around.
Yes.
So thoughts, feelings and emotions, behaviours.
Affect your behaviours, and your behaviours then affect your new thoughts.
Yeah, and they keep going.
So you've got this kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy either going down or going up. One of my global beliefs is when human beings, we're never staying still. We're never static. You're either moving forwards or you're moving backwards. And that's what I see this Mercedes models as, because I could have a positive thought which would impact my feelings and emotions, and therefore my positive feelings and emotions and feelings based on my positive thought impacts my positive behaviour, and therefore my positive behaviour reinforces in a positive feedback loop my
positive thought
my
again.
New thoughts.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'm good at this. I like this.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
So a negative thought impacts a negative feeling, a negative emotion, and that impacts a negative behaviour, and that reinforces a negative feedback loop to keep going down that cycle.
Yeah, I like that. Really smart.
So
That comes in really
one of my
nicely.
global beliefs of like CBT would be like, take the teeter-totter seesaw, okay? I can't think of many things in life whereby the seesaw would be completely level, where the weight on each side would be perfect, where the seesaw would be, it's either up or it's down. You're either sliding slowly. Even if you had two people on there of very similar weight, okay, it could be your exact same weight, but one person's got slightly heavier.
One's leaning forward, one's leaning back.
Or maybe one's got a coat on and one hasn't, and one's got shoes on and one hasn't.
Yeah.
There's just enough of a weight on this teeter-totter for it to tip. And whilst you might not feel like you're moving forwards or moving backwards, it might only be 1 degree out. You are still slowly moving forwards or very, very slowly moving backwards.
You're not stationary.
But there comes a point whereby even if you are just slowly moving and it's only 1 degree out, the weight will slowly tip, and over habits after habit, after days, you'll find all the weight is on one side now.
Yeah.
And then the seesaw has this, I suppose, like point of no return.
Yeah.
Whereby
it needs a lot of force to then push it back up.
Now the weight has got back further away from that fulcrum, that pivot point, where it just goes bam, and the load lifts it up.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we
I
go.
like it.
Should
we end it there?
We've got some core concepts of CBT to go through.
Go for it.
And there's 4 core concepts. So the first one is to understand the levels of cognitive processing, which sounds, I think, a little bit like deep and serious, but really what we're talking about is about conscious and unconscious thoughts. Yep. So we're going to go into each of these as we go through the core concepts of CBT. They kind of expand. But I think the main thing to understand is that there are 3 levels of cognitive processing. You've got a consciousness, you've got automatic thoughts, and you've got schemas. And we'll go through those other ones in a moment. But just the difference between consciousness and unconsciousness is the primary part of understanding cognitive processing.
Can I go into the island analogy now?
Yeah.
Is it too early or not?
No, yes, go for it. No, this is definitely where you'll do it.
So I like to think about this in terms of like consciousness and unconsciousness is kind of seeing the brain like island, where you've got Northern Ireland and Ireland. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you've got Northern Ireland, which is top right of Ireland. Okay. Yeah. And you've got a border.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can't necessarily see the border. You know the border is there. Okay, it's very clear what side of the line you're on. You're either in Northern Ireland or you're in Ireland, and it's probably even more so now with like things like Brexit and whatnot, of like the arguing over like what can go across that line. But for all intents and purposes, like there's no physical wall there. There's no actual barrier. Bless you. I'm not going to edit that one out. I could see Hayley was just about to sneeze. So I'm like, we're going to pause.
It's fine. We're going to pause. Cameron, it was an unconscious sneeze.
Yes, completely. So think about it in terms of like, there's no physical barrier there. It doesn't actually stop anybody from going from Ireland to Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland to Ireland. Okay, yeah. You can come and go. Okay, and you do need a passport to get across there. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, imagine. I think we've put this into previous FITPRO sessions, but imagine that Northern Ireland is your conscious brain.
Right.
And notice that your unconscious brain is Ireland itself.
Yeah.
Okay, which is vastly bigger.
Yeah.
So your unconscious brain has got a disproportionate amount of space, more volume than your Northern Ireland little section at the top, okay, which is your conscious. Nice. Now, for the best part of our day, our conscious brain is making what we believe to be making decisions, and we're consciously running. Okay, so I'm consciously recording this now,
talking.
But I'm only really using a very small section of my brain. Yet there's lots of things going on in the background in my unconscious brain, which is Ireland, and that is responsible for so much more of my day than I could ever imagine.
Yes, we can't even quantify what's going on in there.
No, completely.
Yeah.
And so if you consider now that a lot of our thoughts, all of our thoughts that we are consciously aware of, are all happening up in Ireland, okay?
Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland, sorry, which is the small bit.
Yeah.
With CBT and these various therapeutic approaches and motivational interviewing and hypnosis and NLP that we haven't discussed yet, what we're going to try and do is explore these thoughts from our conscious and have the passport to go back into our unconscious brain, which, again, to remind you, is a vastly disproportionate amount of space compared to Northern Ireland, our conscious brain.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Now, that border that we can't see, okay, you can't see the difference between your conscious and unconscious. There's no physical border there. There's no wall. There's nothing. Just like in Ireland and Northern Ireland, there's just an imaginary line, for a better word.
Yeah.
You know, I've not been there, but there's no spray paint on the floor, is there, to say you are now in Northern Ireland. On major roads, it would have like
it'd be clear.
But overall, you can't see all of the line. Now, between our conscious and unconscious, that's called our critical faculty. Okay, so we're dealing with our conscious thoughts, which lead to our emotions, which lead to our behaviour, which lead to our physical reactions. But a lot of this is going to be dealt with inside our unconscious. And in order to get to our unconscious, we've got to ask world-class questions and have an appropriate environment to get past that critical faculty, okay, which is the border between the conscious and unconscious, and allow our unconscious to actually deliver some world-class answers.
Yeah, nice. What I really love about this is that you're basically saying, in order to access that unconscious, you've got to go through the border between your conscious and your unconscious. And in order to do that, you can then go in, extract information or make changes, and then hop back.
Yes.
And inside the unconscious section, there are two different types. You've got automatic thoughts, which we'll go into in a second, and then schemas, which go even deeper, which we'll go into in a moment. So you kind of end up with consciousness, and then you've got these two other different types swimming around in our unconscious bit.
I like to see it as like Northern Ireland, the conscious would be like rational, making decisions on a rational basis.
Yes. Yeah, okay? So like a logical thought
process.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
So, for example, like conscious, you know, I'm going to go and buy a car, and I could rationally justify it and say, well, it's got great miles per gallon. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just a thought that comes in. I go, actually, that's logical. It's rational for me to say that. However, I could be looking at a totally different car and going, but that one is amazing. Look at that one. Look at that one. And it be the worst miles per gallon. But there's something about that car that I keep getting drawn towards. And that's
totally unconscious.
And that's because I've gone across that critical faculty, and my unconscious is delivering up these other thoughts and conjuring up other emotions that say, Neil, go and look at this car, sit in this car, oh God, look how it feels. And suddenly you're switched on by these automatic thoughts and unconscious schemas that we're not aware of.
Yes. And if you think back to the model that we had a moment ago, we had the situation at the top and then you had the compass of the four things underneath.
Yeah.
If you now think that of the four things, your situation happens, thoughts then influence your emotions, your behaviours and stuff. Those thoughts could be conscious or they could be unconscious thoughts. So sometimes you can even go in and make a behaviour of something that's related to an unconscious thought that you weren't even aware of. Because it all happened unconsciously. It doesn't have to be a conscious thought to create a behaviour or an emotion or anything else.
It's pretty powerful, isn't it?
Isn't it?
So if we move down to automatic thoughts.
Yes, let's go deeper into that.
Cool, go for it.
So automatic thoughts are the unconscious thoughts that are leading and driving, like what we said, our emotions and our behaviours, etc. Now, some of these are helpful. Some of them are unhelpful. Yeah. They are accurate and they are inaccurate. So you've kind of got different categorisations.
Okay, just categorise them again. So
you've got helpful and unhelpful.
Perfect.
Then you've got...
So to pause you, I could have a helpful thought, which helps me move forwards.
Yes.
Okay, or I've got an unhelpful thought that helps me move backwards.
Yes.
Which goes back to our teeter-totter.
Yes, yeah,
okay,
exactly.
So I'm either moving forwards or back, either helpful or unhelpful. And then you had two more, which were...
accurate thoughts. And accurate thoughts are things that clearly represent what has happened. So if we go back to Bob saying something about Jim's lat pull down when he was criticising him, the accurate and probably helpful thought that Jim would have would be, oh, he's just criticised my lat pull down. That's absolute statement of what happened. It's factual. Whereas when he turned around and went, my thought is that I'm not good enough, he therefore has turned it into an inaccurate thought, relating to something that happened.
There's a really good book that isn't in our notes that I want to mention here, which is called The Work by Byron Katie.
Yeah.
And she talks heavily around this, about kind of like, I suppose it's cheesy in saying that the truth will set you free, but it's understanding what are the facts. And I think that's what a lot of people in any day-to-day thing, whether it be conscious or unconscious, really struggle with is looking at something for how it is. And that's what Tony Robbins taught us back in 2013. Look at it for what it is, not for what you want it to be or what you want it to look like.
Yeah.
You know, what are the facts as you know it right now? And you might not like seeing or hearing or tasting or smelling the facts, but they are the facts.
Yeah.
So is it accurate and inaccurate, or is it helpful and unhelpful?
And what's really interesting in CBT is that there's clear acknowledgement that those that have mental health issues or problems are also those that have more inaccurate thoughts within that scheme.
And unhelpful thoughts.
Exactly. And also those that have behaviours that are incompatible to the goal or incongruent to the goal.
Perfect.
Are also showing unhelpful or inaccurate thoughts.
So just go through that bit again, because there was a lot you just said. So you recap it and I'll paraphrase
those
it. And I'll summarise
those that have the mental health bit as well.
Yeah.
So those that have mental health issues or problems or conditions are more likely to have more unhelpful or inaccurate thoughts.
I'm going to use myself here. I'm going to be really vulnerable. So I have on certain days crippling anxiety. Yeah. And I can see this model in me so easily. So just recap what you just said, and let's use me as the example.
Those that have mental health conditions or problems or issues are more likely to have more unhelpful or inaccurate thoughts.
So on a day where I experience high levels of anxiety, I have I'm potentially more exposed to more unhelpful thoughts. And
following a situation.
If a situation happens, I also interpret it with an inaccurate viewpoint.
Yeah, your
So
thought.
for example, if I'm sitting back on the sofa now, the perspective is I'm seeing it for what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. There is 2 legs, and I can see the back of the sofa and I can see the arms of the sofa. Mm-hmm. But what I've done when it's inaccurate, I've looked at it from a slightly different perspective, and I'm not seeing it for what it is. Yeah. And therefore it's an inaccurate thought, which leads to that being it's unhelpful information for my brain, which you can already tell isn't going to bode very well for somebody that is already highly anxious.
Yeah. Doesn't it make so much sense with communication? So
yes.
If we say that we all sent a message to Neil, right? So we're all going to send him a text, and I could send him the same text on 2 different days. Depending on how he looks at it with helpful or unhelpful thought processing will determine his emotions, his behaviours and his physical reactions he gets from it. Now that isn't a result of the message, because the message is exactly the same. Yeah. The text message is exactly the same. And the reason why I chose the text message is because you can't see tone of voice and everything else. So that communication had to be clear, so it didn't send you down an unhelpful
inaccurate thought process completely. Yeah. And that's why so many I suppose arguments and things happen on social media, is because you are already in a current situation, you're already running a whole host of conscious and unconscious thoughts, feelings and emotions, and the way somebody writes something and you interpret that, it's, remember,
7% verbal, isn't it?
Yeah, like we're getting frustrated about the other person, yet it's our perspective of what we're viewing.
Yeah.
And it's our own thoughts that aren't necessarily real, but it's our reaction and behaviour and emotions based on that thought. And yet they had all good intentions. They had all the best, and that's what everything we do, there is always good intentions behind it.
Nice. Okay.
So you could turn around and say, well, this person didn't have good intentions at work, or my kids don't have good intentions when they keep me up all night, whatever. But they all have good intentions in that moment. They're not doing it to annoy you, to frustrate you, or to trigger you. Yeah. We're only triggered because it's our own situation, and we go back through this CBT model.
Our own thought processing.
Our own thought process, our own emotions behind that, and then we link words to that, we link language to that, we link a behaviour to that and a physical reaction. And now you've got this self-fulfilling prophecy either going down or going up. And then with unhelpful, helpful thoughts, or accurate, inaccurate thoughts.
Exactly. And the other part of this was noticing differences on behaviour relating to goal. So you might have a client that you've got an example by the looks of it.
I was going to say, let's use me as the example. You've got to tell me what you're going to say.
Tell me what to say. A sign that somebody is running unhelpful or inaccurate thought processes is that their behaviours that they do or things they say don't match with their goal or intention.
Completely. I'm not going to expose all of this because we don't need all of it. But I'm going to say
story.
yesterday, this is a true story, okay? I was a highly anxious day. I was triggered in the morning, and that led on to a cascade of other thoughts, feelings and emotions that unraveled throughout the day.
Yeah.
To the point my behaviour on the phone wasn't rude to anybody, but I was very stern in my message, wasn't in alignment with the very thing I want, which is what I'm heading towards as a goal.
Yeah.
And so this is exactly that, isn't it? I had an unhelpful thought, okay, which led to an inaccurate perception of my thoughts, which led to various emotions that led to a behaviour and then a physical reaction of me actualising it, bringing this thought to a reality, okay, which, for a better word, wasn't in alignment with my goal.
Yeah. Isn't this self-sabotage?
It completely is.
So self-sabotage is whereby you want something, you say you want something, you are all in for it, but then you do, or things happen whereby your behaviours stop you from achieving that, or sabotage it along the way. And that is all under automatic thoughts.
Well, think about this, like, for your clients, in terms of, like, how do they, are they self-sabotaging their nutrition? Are they self-sabotaging their efforts? Do they get so far for a program and then stop? Why did someone pause? Why did someone relapse? It goes back to a trans-theoretical model, doesn't it? Of that, like, point of, like, why did they just pause? Why didn't they get back to me?
Why did they go and binge out in this?
Why did they binge out? Why did they ghost me? Why did they do that for a weekend? Like, I don't understand it. What was the situation? What was the cue? What was the trigger? What was the unhelpful and inaccurate perspective of that thought, feeling and emotion?
It's amazing, isn't it?
I think this is
so fascinating.
This is a solid episode,
isn't it?
Because it's
like a full course in
it allows hopefully it allows you to sit there and go, that makes sense of why I did what I did, or why I do what I do,
or why someone else has done what they did, or why somebody else
do it.
When you say something to someone, you're like, God, I don't know why you reacted like that. That's a bit bizarre.
Yeah.
And that's because it's not congruent to what you expected, based on maybe you've done the same thing before to them, or said the same thing before, yet they responded in a totally different way because they applied a different thought process to it.
It reminds me, because I've done that, I've worked with literally hundreds and hundreds of guys inside my boot camp that all are overweight and obese and have various conditions and whatnot. But it reminds me of many situations whereby they'd come back in on a Monday and they'd tell me about what happened over the weekend. And you could see whether it was something that was maybe being consciously driven, that was pre-planned to self-sabotage, or they genuinely didn't understand why they ate that over the weekend, or how. I remember one of my clients actually turning around on numerous occasions going, I don't actually remember eating the cheesecake.
Wow.
And I know that sounds quite abstract, but the amount of times that one of my clients would literally sit in his van over lunch and get to the end of it and go, I don't even recall buying it. I don't even recall eating it.
Yeah.
Didn't satiate.
Because it was all unconscious thought.
All unconscious. So really, what was the cue? What was the trigger? What was the situation that led that person on the cascade to have a physical behaviour of buying that and then eating it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're all those...
so, where in your world do you have clients? That's my question, I suppose. Sorry for jumping in. Can you take this information and help a client unravel unhelpful thoughts, helpful thoughts, okay, to either move forward or back, and inaccurate thoughts and accurate thoughts to move forward or back as well?
Yeah, lovely. And the next one to have a look at is cognitive errors, which moves on really nicely. So, we were talking about those helpful and unhelpful thoughts, the things that are inaccurate. These come out in the things that we say and the things that we do in terms of our behaviours. Now, with cognitive errors, there are 6 that we can look out for. These are examples of errors that your client might make in how they're phrasing something or things that they're doing that basically show that they're running an unhelpful or inaccurate thought processing.
And I like to link now, because we have got to do one on NLP, which will be another future episode. Within that, you've got 3 key constructs, really. You're either going to delete something from the language.
Yeah.
You're going to delete a word or delete something from the accuracy of the fact.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to distort the fact. Okay. So you're going to, I suppose, bend the truth. Okay. or you're going to generalize, whereby you're going to make it so airy-fairy woolly in your language that you can't pinpoint specifics of the fact. So you've got the fact, you're either going to delete part of the fact, you're going to distort part of that fact, or you're going to generalize the fact. And you're left with these cognitive errors. So the 6 are, so if I just read them.
That's
okay,
cool.
So you've got selective abstraction. You've got arbitrary inference. Am I reading these right?
So
you read them.
Selective.
my writing is not great.
Selective abstraction, arbitrary inference. It looks like it's just interference, doesn't it? Overgeneralization, magnification and minimization, personalization, and absolutistic all or nothing thinking. So absolute, basically.
Absolute, so all or nothing thinking. Cool. So let's just dive into each one of these. So let's look at selective abstraction.
So this is whereby you're drawing a conclusion based only on a small amount of the available information. So essentially you've deleted something else that means that you turn around and say, I'm going to ignore all of that part that you said, or of that thing that happened, and I'm just going to focus on this. So, for example, I could go back to Bob's situation, and I could where we had Bob and Jim talking in the gym, in the gym, but when Bob said that criticism to Jim, he might have also said some really good things to Jim about what he is as a PT, and he might delete out all of that part of the conversation and instead just focus on the bad thing that he said.
A lot of CBT, a lot of the transtheoretical model, a lot of these kind of the early studies around these therapeutic approaches were based on smoking cessation. Okay, so a smoking example would be where, let's take Bob now, because Bob has got a mean character.
He has a bit, isn't he?
Okay, so let's just say, look, Bob goes outside of the back of a gym and he's smoking. Okay, so you could ask Bob, let's pick on Bob, and say, why do you smoke? And he said, from a selective abstraction, Bob continues to smoke, because he has ignored all of the important information around the health risks, but has chosen to pick up on one kind of medical condition for which nicotine reduces risks.
So
he picks out just one kind of positive, the snowflake stories.
The smallest bit of research that says, however, if you have one a day, this bit of nicotine will benefit, blah.
Completely.
And he just focuses on that one thing rather than all of the other data that says don't do it.
Is deleted, and somewhat distorted and generalised, but mainly deleted.
So he selectively abstracted it.
Selectively abstracted information to suit his health behaviour.
Nice.
Or to justify his health behaviour.
Yes.
Cool. Next one down, which is what neither of us could say, which was arbitrary inference.
Is where you come to a conclusion that is consistent with an existing belief, even in the face of contradictory evidence or without any evidence to support this perspective. So I knew I was right, regardless of the research that comes in or of the situation that you're in.
So an example for your client might be that perhaps they're overweight or obese, and this person will continue to believe that weight is unrelated to health, despite all the evidence. So there is an overwhelming, overarching level of evidence around how being overweight of BMI 25 to 29.9 and then BMI 30 and above, and then grade 1, 2, 3, morbidly obese, whatnot, links to various conditions, how it leads to premature death, how it leads to a whole multitude of multi-comorbidities. And it's basically saying that's all unrelated.
This reminds me of a situation I had with my dad. Now, he used to eat what he called thunder and lightning for breakfast. Now, the thunder and lightning, you guys will giggle at this because you're FITPROs, but is a thick slice of white bread with clotted cream, and I mean thick clotted cream, and then honey over the top for breakfast. And he'd have one of those every morning, basically. And I remember when I was learning originally about becoming a PT and health things, and I would tell him all this information about cholesterol and impact of even insulin spikes and stuff throughout the day, and he'd be like, it's not killed me yet. So he would use that one evidence of the fact that he's still alive to be that it must be okay.
So it's believing that something isn't unrelated.
It's not related to that.
Cool.
It's fine.
Next one down is overgeneralization.
Yes.
Which I like this because it immediately says we've got distortion, deletion, and generalization. So we know what this is going to be. So this is making a conclusion about an isolated incident or limited number of incidences, and then applying this conclusion illogically to a much broader context.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I like about this as an example away from fitness is you can see it in racism, sexism, anything along those lines, whereby somebody has had one experience and they generalise it across to everything.
Yes, great. That's a good example, actually.
Isn't it?
And I think well put, well said.
And why so many people can turn around and say it doesn't make sense why they would feel that way about me, but they've generalised their opinion based on one experience.
It's a great point. Okay, I'd like you to pause that and think about maybe just what Hayley just said around racism and sexism. There's lots of topics, isms there. There's lots of topics that trigger a lot of people, and maybe we've created a thought.
Fattest, genderist, all of it.
I'd be really,
Do you have an opinion about blonde people compared to brunettes? Do you have an opinion about people that have beards, that don't have beards, that have glasses, that don't have glasses?
Our behaviours and our physical reactions, our actualisation of our thoughts now impact other people, and we could become the Bob.
Yeah.
There we go.
Opinions about accountants, insurers, lawyers, doctors, whatever it is.
Cool.
Yeah, nice.
Next one down is magnification and minimization. I was trying to read my notes like a minima.
And it's a bit of a distortion, really, isn't it? Because you're basically either magnifying, so making one event really big, really important, or you minimize it by, it doesn't matter. So you're literally either magnifying or minimizing it.
But ultimately, it's about making it consistent with existing beliefs or perceptions.
There you go.
So again, go back to the sofa. We're sitting on the sofa, and this is my belief, this is my thoughts, these are my feelings, and so I'm going to magnify this to be consistent with my confirmation bias, or I'm going to minimize it to support my confirmation bias.
Yes.
Cool.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's really clear.
So we've got 2 more to go through, and then we've got schemas. So first off, I appreciate the fact you're still with us. We're 55 odd minutes in. It's not a huge amount of time left, but we will probably end up being one of our longest ones. So let's stop gabbling. Next one down is personalisation.
Yeah, and this is relating an event or situation to oneself, when there is little or no reason to do so. So you become the cause.
Which you just did.
To oneself.
Oneself.
I didn't have to make it about me.
You didn't have to make it about... Sorry.
This can include a person taking excessive responsibility or blame, or negative events that are unrelated to them. So it could be like that something happened and they take that blame on for themselves, or it could be that they've seen examples where other people have, let's say for example, lived to the age of 90, whereby they've smoked, they've drunk, they've not done any exercise, and they lived that old, that healthy sort of life right to the end. So they tell me it was all right for them, so it'll be all right for me.
Which is the thunder and lightning thing with your dad.
Yeah, same sort of thing, completely. Isn't it? Yeah.
So then the final one is absolutistic. So this was that all or nothing thinking. So
which distortion, right?
Yeah, completely.
So you're basically turning around and saying that there's a limiting perspective such that all events and experiences and actions of one person, so of that person, is categorized into an extreme of either good, bad, all, nothing, perfect, broken, beautiful, ugly, successful, failing. So they're binary.
So it's a this or that, isn't it? And we could all agree, well, maybe not, okay, that having an all or nothing thinking, certainly from a fitness perspective or nutrition perspective, isn't helpful, and it's also inaccurate.
You see that in good and bad foods, don't you?
You see that in good and bad.
Can't have white bread, it's bad, but you can have brown bread because it's good.
Yes.
You can't have this food, but you can have that, and it becomes good and bad.
And you can see it heavily within, say, maybe, I don't know, I'm jumping into maybe down a rabbit hole we don't need to, but within certain age groups, I'm going to take teenage girls and social media and looking at maybe anorexia nervosa, and so looking at the impact and effect of social media, and that's beautiful, yet that's ugly. Yeah, so different perceptions. There's no grey areas. Completely. It's all absolute. And CBT, picking out one of those conditions around eating disorders, CBT is heavily used within that.
Yeah.
Hugely. It's one of the main therapeutic approaches for eating disorders. So anorexia nervosa, bulimia and so forth, and binge eating. And
it's massively used for eating disorders. Completely. And mood disorders.
So there's our 6 thingies
cognitive
which linked
errors.
to cognitive errors, which were part of levels of cognitive processing. The final
So if you see lots of these start to come up with your clients, you might turn around and go, that's a sign that they're not processing thoughts in a helpful way.
Or an accurate way.
So I would refer on to a CBT specialist that could look at that in more detail, especially if they're struggling to stick to their goals and their new behaviours.
Can you see
It'd be perfect, wouldn't it?
Like I opened this with language because it's key that I have this sensory acuity to their language and understanding. Okay, they just gave me a sentence, they just gave me a 90-second spiel, but if I took that and I recorded that and I dissected those, I don't know, let's say 5 sentences that made up the paragraph they were talking about, did they delete something? Was there context and content? Was there a frame? Okay, but Mona Lisa only looks and is as amazing as it is with the frame around it. Okay, so the frame frames for Mona Lisa. Okay, so are they just giving you content or have they given you context? Have they deleted something? Have they distorted something? Have they generalized something? Where in those sentences can you go, well, actually, that doesn't make sense. They've missed something out and I don't know what it is they've missed. Or they've come to the conclusion and I don't know how they got to that conclusion.
Or it doesn't make sense why they would do that behaviour based on they saying they want one thing and they're doing another. So let's map it up. Cool. So final part is schemas.
And you've got 3 approaches to schemas. And the first one, so let's label them first. Okay, so you've got simple schemas. You've got intermediary beliefs and assumptions as kind of schema number 2. And schema number 3 is looking at core beliefs about the self.
Yeah, so all of these are still unconscious. Just to kind of give that out.
So let's put this back into context. Let's put it back into the frame. So we had levels of cognitive processing. So we said there was conscious and unconscious.
Yeah.
Okay, which was our Northern Ireland Island and critical faculty with the border.
And then inside unconscious,
unconscious, you've got automatic thoughts and schemas. So we've done automatic thoughts, which were the 6 cognitive errors. And now we're in inaccurate, and helpful and unhelpful. And now we're in schemas, which is still part of Ireland, which is the unconscious.
Yeah, nice.
So the first one is simple beliefs. So these are beliefs about the rules governing the physical environment, okay, and
our own daily life as well. So they're...
I don't know why I paused then.
I don't know why you paused. I just finished that sentence.
I didn't know where I was going to go next. But you were like, this is where you are.
So it's all about our rules of daily life that we lead. So they're so simple and so unconscious that we just follow them. So you might have an unconscious rule that you always wake up, you have breakfast and then you have a shower and you do them in that order. You might have an unconscious rule of daily life whereby when you lay the table, you always put the knife on one side and the fork on the other side.
I like that.
It might be that when you tie up your shoelaces...
editing it.
that when you tie up your shoelaces, you always do the right foot before you do the left foot.
When you go up the stairs, you always lead with the left foot.
Yeah.
Okay, when you go out for a drive, when Hayley and I, husband and wife, go out for a drive, I always drive.
Yes, or that you put the watch on the left arm or the right arm.
Yeah, completely.
They feel different.
Yeah.
So they're totally unconscious, simple schemas. They don't necessarily massively affect your like behaviours or deep beliefs as such. So they're not beliefs, but they're things you do.
But they could impact your thoughts heavily still.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
Nice. So they're the simple schemas.
Second schema is intermediary beliefs and assumptions.
Yes, so these are all about how you kind of take a situation and associate it within yourself based on an assumption.
So like an external event could be...
like going to the gym.
Could be going to the gym. So you could say going to the gym...
if I go to the gym, people will look at me.
People look at me. If I go to the gym and there's mirrors, I don't like looking at myself and therefore I will have low self-confidence.
Yeah, so it's conditional rules that we set up that basically say... This is what I believe if that happens.
So the external event is the driving force behind the belief of that happening. Whereas the third and final ones, which are core beliefs about ourselves, we almost flip that on its head and say that your identity linked to the external environment is why you'd have high self-confidence or low self-confidence.
So I'm too deconditioned, I can't go to the gym.
Completely. Whereas the previous one was... If I go to the gym, I'm too deconditioned.
People will look at me.
So it was like it's like an inverse relationship, isn't it? So the second one was physical environment relates to one, and then the third one, the core belief, is one relates to the physical environment.
Yeah, and also about that third one is the identity. So it goes deeper. So it goes so simple that it could be about knives and forks to start off with.
Yeah.
Then it's about how you interact with others in terms of assumptions and environments, and then finally the identity you set yourself based on.
And remember, all this comes back to a thought. fort, okay, or a situation, okay, so the schema, the situation would be the gym, okay, that's the situation, which leads to a fort, which leads to an emotion, which leads to a behaviour, which leads to a physical reaction. And remember, right at the beginning of this, we had it on a bit of paper where we had situation at the top, then this kind of north, east, south and west, and we had the crosshairs in the middle. They all link to each other. And so we've got to come back to all of these are situations or cues or triggers, okay, that lead to a fort. And it's that fort inside CBT that we are trying to, I suppose, for a better word, reprogram. Around a thought process based upon a situation, trigger or cue. Because one day, like a minute earlier on, you said like one day I could have one text come through and that was the situation and I could read it and it could lead to a series of helpful, unhelpful thoughts, or it could lead to simple schemas, or it could get my core beliefs moving about me in relation to the text or the text in relation to me. And so now you can see all this underpinning, okay, these levels of cognitive processing at a conscious or unconscious level. Am I living in Northern Ireland or am I living in Ireland? And how am I moving across this critical faculty, that passport to go between the two willy-nilly, okay? And how is that conjuring up a whole host of thoughts that get me to my goal, that are aligned to the things I want in my day and my world and go moving forwards or not?
What I love about everything we've said is that it just shows, doesn't it? We all do this, like everybody.
Yeah, it's not it's happening right now.
So for me, like my previous assumption or previous perspective of what CBT would have been, and this is years ago, I would have said, oh, it's only broken people or people with mental health conditions that would go to a CBT therapist.
Far from it, isn't it?
But it's not, because everybody has cognitive processes. Everybody has thoughts that are either helpful or unhelpful that lead to behaviours. So at any point that we're finding it tough to be able to change our behaviours, it would make sense that we'd have help to unpick and reprogram those thoughts.
Even on the days where I turn around and go like, oh, I've not felt that anxious today, that's a thought in itself.
Yes.
Or a day where I go, actually,
your behaviour might be nothing.
Yesterday I had a really, really good day. I just felt really relaxed, which is a thought. And I was still thinking in that day, this is a system, your body, your brain, this incredible computer is not switched off at any point. So whilst we might not be present, consciously aware that we are thinking, our unconscious levels of automatic thoughts and schemas, you right there? Hiccuping away, are switched on 24/7 at a rate or a point that we will never be able to comprehend or quantify or understand. And so we are subject to this thought, feeling, emotion, behaviour, reaction, situation, this cycle of this web. All the time. And it's our job as FITPROs to help our clients have a better health, mental, physical well-being. And this is one of the many approaches you could take.
And it strengthens what we've said already about communication skills and your job as a FITPRO, being able to listen. You're probably the person that is able to spend the most amount of time with that client and listen and have a conversation with them. And actually you're fishing to find out what those deeper unconscious things might be. Because you could be
the ultimate signpost, you could be the ultimate red flag signpost to say, actually, you do need a little bit more guidance. I'm out of my depth here. This isn't inside my scope of practice. But if you think about somebody that does have an unhealthy relationship with food or physical activity, sedentary living, their job, their stress, just general day to day, you're going to spend, let's just say, at least 1 hour a week with them as a one-to-one, or even in a group-based situation. They might turn up three times a week. You've got at least maybe 3 lots of 45 minutes with them a week. Versus if they go and ask for guidance or help, they might only spend a very short period of time with another medical professional. So actually, they might not even get there at all. So actually, you are in the trenches with your person, and the loved ones around them might be, I suppose, blighted for a better word, because they are too close to the situation as well. But you're just this kind of fly on the wall for 1 hour a week or 3 hours a week, whereby you can say, well, actually, I've noticed X, Y, and Z. And you can start to unpick and unravel their thoughts, feelings and emotions with them, or guide them to a place where they can seek better help.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like also the awareness that we've just had in this, is that turn around and say that just because somebody reacted or acted in a certain way doesn't mean they're broken, doesn't mean that they have an issue or a problem. It just means that they had a thought and they're responding around that thought. They've got different cognitive processing. So immediately, if your client's feeling quite low in their self-efficacy, maybe like they're feeling guilty about how they reacted or responded, you can immediately educate them that actually everybody has this, and that will make them feel so much better in the moment.
You can challenge them and their detached logic around that.
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah.
What I'd really like to know is what's been your big takeaway. It feels like we've packed so much into this one, and I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed this.
For me, I like your analogy of Ireland. I've heard the critical faculty, because it gives me a image that I can imagine, that I then place everything we've spoken about into it.
Completely.
And I find that really nice, like that idea of having a chat with somebody and almost feeling like you can see past that border into what they're really thinking, based on what their behaviours are doing.
Maybe 3 or 5 or 7 questions deeper to go into that
other area.
Cool. For me, I really just like unpicking language, to be honest. And I've stumbled a few times today on my language. But really understanding, where do we get deletion, where do we get distortion, and where do we get generalization? I think this cues up nicely to jump into neuro-linguistic programming and NLP on a future session.
Yes.
Okay, whether it be next week or another week, we will leave you on that hanging edge.
Yeah.
But what I'd really like to do is to go inside the inner circle, somewhere around this video or whatever platform app you're listening on will be a link to our Parallel Coaching Inner Circle, which is in Facebook. I'd really like to know what's your big takeaway from today and season 8 so far. And if you haven't done so already, drop a 5-star review inside iTunes. You wouldn't believe the impact that has on that platform and that algorithm for us to reach more people. And as you know, this is all an unsponsored podcast. It's just Hayley and I on our couch from this perspective. Those are the facts.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's with you liking, commenting, sharing, and pushing the name of FITPRO Sessions Podcast out, that it's the success it is.
Yep, so if you're on YouTube, make sure that you share it with a friend, tag a friend into it, or hit subscribe to our channel so you get notification of the next one as well.
And with that, we will see you bright and breezy this time next week for episode number 8, which is episode 8 of 8, but we might have to do 9 and 10.
We might end up having 10 of 8.
See you later.
Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FITPRO doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FITPRO? This is the FITPRO Sessions Podcast with Parallel Coaching.